Well, it is a brand new month. May is now on the calendar. What is that weather outlook shaping up to be as we get into the month of May and we continue our spring planting season? Also, a little bit of a look back at just the past month, the month of April, here to walk through things with us as we look at this week's weather forecast. Eric Snodgrass of Nutrient is here. Eric, always good to catch up with you, and it's nice to flip the calendar to May, and I know we're going to talk about that in a second, but we also, I think we should take a little bit of a look back at the month of April. What a wild weather month it was in April, Eric.
Yeah, a lot of severe weather, especially down south. And then, of course, in parts of the Midwest. We saw the Western United States was very cold to start. Pacific Northwest was cold all the way until like the last 4 or 5 days. I mean, near record cold. We saw snowpacks staying around in the northern plains. Thankfully, that is gone. And then we finished the month of April after having that just incredible warm stretch after Easter. Well, we finished the month of April really quite cold across much of the eastern half of the country. And we're going to start off May that way as well. So you look back at it and you always just want to know, did we get a jump start on this season? And even though we've heard some pretty fast planting progress numbers, like in my home state of Illinois, I've driven around the state and I'll tell you, not much has really emerged just yet. It's kind of unfortunate to sit in the ground with some of that colder weather that's been in place. So yeah, very peculiar April. And I'm glad to turn the calendar and to get into May, because hopefully it's going to bring a whole new set of issues that maybe will be more positive for a lot of growers in the central U.S.
Well, let's talk about the month of May. I know we've seen some new CPC outlooks here. You mentioned that to me before we went on the air, and just looking at this month, obviously this is that window. The next 3 to 4 weeks, we really got to ramp up this planting pace and get this crop in the ground. So, what's this May outlook shaping up to be?
Well, I'll tell you the number one thing we should all be looking for, and that's called southwest jet stream flow. And we'd love it if the jet stream could every once in a while, maybe twice a week. That would be my ask. Twice a week, go from Arizona to New York State. And the reason for that would be that would set up things to draw moisture into the plains where we still have lingering drought. May is typically the stormiest month for the plains, and this is one of those years where we need it to be stormy. We need the moisture to get back into the drought area. That would also return a lot of warmth to the midsection of the country. But if you're going to have warmth in the midsection of the country, you're going to have a lot of people on the West Coast that are not going to like that. They need to pick up those heat units to get their crops established. Plus, there's still a tremendous amount of snow that needs to melt in the West. We've got flooding throughout parts of the West. There's flooding on the Mississippi River right now. We need May to really bring in some warmth. And thankfully, it will be doing that. We've got days of cooler weather ahead of us, but the pattern is moderating. We're starting to see better conditions come in with more warmer weather. And it's going to not just be in the central United States, it's going to be up the Canadian prairie as well. So we're going to put the pedal down, I think, with what still needs to get planted. And a lot of work is going to get done here in the coming days and weeks.
Well, Eric, I know we've talked a bit and we've been hearing a lot about this potential shift to El Nino as we get into the summer growing season. So, as we look at what's happening in the Pacific Ocean, can you talk a little bit just about what we're seeing there and what still needs to happen? I feel like there's a lot of things that really need to happen here when it comes to what's happening out in the Pacific right now.
Yeah, so let's do this two ways. First, what do we have now and what does it mean? And then secondly, what are we expecting? So what we have right now is there's been a significant portion of the US that has recovered from drought from last fall. But you still know the central plains into the central western corn belt still have dry pockets in them. And I want that eliminated. I want May to be stormy. I want it to tighten up the windows. I want to get the crop in, but I don't want to be worrying about water in June and July. Now, the second part of this story is told in the Pacific Ocean, because once the crop is established, we're just watching Mother Nature to see how how weather is going to allow this crop to mature. And right now we have two competing factors. There's cold water off the West Coast and very warm water building across the equator. The cold water along the West Coast is called the negative phase of the PDO. Historically, that's a drought signal for the central United States. El Nino in the middle of the equatorial Pacific is a wet signal for the central United States. So it's going to be a competition as to which one's going to win out. But I want to remind you of something. When you think about it, this is the only thing we have to discuss right now for summer. Like, that's it. So that's what we're talking about. The reality of it is there's dozens of sub-seasonal factors that can affect summer weather. And you know this as well as I do. You can go into a summer with heat and drought, and then perfectly timed rains give you huge crops. You can also go into summer with plenty of soil moisture, plenty of early rain, and then it gets hot and dry at the wrong time. And therefore, you start to peel back the yield potential. The reality of it is predicting out all the way through summer what to expect. We cannot do that. And anybody that talks about it, just remember that what they're sharing with you is speculative, even if they have a lot of confidence when they say it. So the big question is, will El Nino win the battle and give us better chances of avoiding long duration heat and drought? That's what an El Nino does. And I think this year it's going to be a combination between that and the Pacific Decadal Oscillation and the Bermuda High. All things you and I will continue to talk about in the coming weeks and months.
Definitely, and I agree. I think got to take some things that far out with just a little bit of a grain of salt, and just keep that in the back of your mind as we move forward. Eric, let's turn our attention as well around the rest of the globe. Anything you're seeing, Europe, South America, anywhere else that you're keeping an eye on right now?
Yeah, we're still experiencing a heat wave in the Iberian Peninsula. That would be where Spain and Portugal are located. Also, the northwestern part of Africa, very hot and dry. And they do grow a lot of crop in that area. You then get over to parts of Central Europe, it's not quite as hot, but then parts of Russia, quite warm right now for this time of year, including Kazakhstan. India, quite cold, very wet. This is not monsoon related, but quite cold and very wet. Same thing with parts of Australia, just not the wet side, but very cold in the interior. But you mentioned South America. We're drier in central and northern Brazil for the next 10 days, but it's the time of year that it's drier, right? I mean, the monsoon ends in the month of May. So this isn't a major concern. The NDVI values on the safrinha crop are huge. They're very high, which means the crop looks healthy from space. Heavy rains in Paraguay, southern Brazil, and finally in Argentina. Not going to help out with this year's crops, but may be important for getting the water levels back up for when they go to plant their winter wheat. They do grow winter wheat in Argentina. We'll have to watch for that. So yeah, the whole thing's in flux right now. And I think we have a lot to blame on El Nino's transition just to see how this all lays out this spring and summer.
Well, we'll be keeping our eyes on it. Folks can stay up to date as well with your daily weather newsletters. They can sign up for those. The link is on our website, markettalkag.com. Eric Snodgrass, Nutrient, always great to catch up with you, buddy. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. See you then.